And you know, we go back to step 3, self. And we talked last week about the things that make up self. We said self, every human being has self and it's God-given. And self is made up of basically 3 things. We have our social instincts, and our security instincts, and our sex instincts. These are God-given. And these things make up self. You know, these things are there, and they serve. We talked about the role that they serve. They serve a vital purpose. But sometimes in every human being, nobody's perfect. When these things come out of control, then they cause problems in our lives. So we want to see how what is the manifestation of self in my life. These are the things that block us. So in step 4, you know, the first thing we're going to do, he's going to tell us that resentment is the #1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. And we're going to look at resentments. You know, there's another word, resentment. I didn't know what, you know, many times I didn't know anything about resentments. Usually I'd say, well, I don't really resent anybody. I thought that they did this to me, and I just went around mad all the time. I didn't have no name for it. I was just mad. You know. Well, we look at the word resentments, and it comes from the word, when we see a word in the front, and it comes from the word centire, which means to feel. So it means to refeel. And it's a normal process. You know, we human beings have this. We've been given this ability, and it really works pretty good. I think we don't have anything bad, by the way. It's just, you know, everything's bad when it's in the wrong place. That's the way he used it, right? There's a time for everything. There's a time for everything in our life. None of us are perfect with all these things. And resentment is the ability to refeel. Someone does something to you, and it strikes self. Did it hurt your security, emotional security? Did it hurt your material security? Did it interfere with threaten your sex life? Did it threaten your self-esteem or your pride? Did they threaten your companionship? When they had to threaten one of these things. One of these things is threatened, we're hurt. So self is the root of the problem. And when self is hurt, you know, when an alcoholic, when a self is hurt, when you hurt us, they do that one time. They don't do it but once usually. And then we go home in the quietness of our room or in our car or somewhere, and we replay that whole scene over again. I was standing there, she come up, and she said that to me. And we replay the scene over again to hurt ourselves and blame it on her. Now, that's a lie. She did it the first time. You did it that time. And the whole thing's a lie. The whole thing's a total lie. Now, every time we play this thing over, it gets worse. Now, on top of that, not only that other person gets meaner and dirtier, and every time you play it over, you get better. I really wasn't doing nothing. And you believe it. That's a sickness. We believe it. And finally, you play it over one time, they are mean. And I was standing there and my halo was out, when she did it to me. And I did nothing. Okay, let's look at this. We replay that over and over and over just to make ourselves sick. And I always look at this as I was looking at the football game yesterday. Every time I turn on the football game, I just immediately see that machine. And, they got a real deal now, where they even argue about it. But They tape all this thing, and when a guy gets hit, didn't hit him but once. You know what I mean? Sometimes the guy gets up and goes back game. Sometimes they have to carry him off the field. But that ain't good enough for the old announcer. He'll say, let's look at that again. And he'll turn it back in. Now, when you look at it the second time, it's a lot worse. A lot worse. Got it slow motion, living color. You can see the pain in the guy's face. And that's the way the alcoholic does. He gets up in the morning, turns on his video recorder, shines it on the world. Don't record anything good. Don't record the good stuff. You know what I mean? Only picks up the negative, sick things. You know what I mean? And he's sharp because he's a good reporter. He's all day searching for those things. You know what I mean? Sometimes he can't find none. And then he can create them. You know what I mean? He said, I know what she was thinking about me. And now that's the height of being, that's the sickest you can get. When you know what somebody else is thinking, you sick as hell. That's the height of self-will, to know what someone else is thinking. Come in. Okay. And we replay these things over again until it finally produces, resentment is the number one offender. It's like a two-edged sword. It's like a boomerang because it goes out and it comes back. You know, because once you resent what they did to you, then you resent you don't like, you resent you. You know, if I hadn't have been here, that wouldn't have happened. You resent your own self. And that's the worst emotional illness that an individual can have. And that's what we call self-pity, is self-resentments. We resent ourselves. God created us. And loves us, and we resent being us. We will not accept us. Now, he said this destroys more alcoholics than anything else. It cuts us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. This is what blocks us. How can God direct, how can he enter this inner directions that are supposed to be there? It's there. But we don't think it's there. We don't think it's there because it's blocked off constantly by this. How can God direct a mind full of resentments? So the first thing we're going to do is inventory our resentments. And throughout this process, you know, in our book, we have he gave us a whole set of instructions and he gave us an illustration in here how to take in our book of how to do an inventory. I don't know how we messed it up, so. He said the first thing we do, he said in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Again, it's got to be written down. You got to have pencil, paper, typewriter, computer, paintbrush, or something to do this with. Okay? He said, first, number one instruction, we listed people, institutions, and principles with whom we were angry. Now, you don't have to be sober 10 years to do this either. In fact, you can do it right away. You know, as soon as you get right after step 3 is the best time to do it, the book said. At once, we start on step 4. At once. Didn't say 30 days, at once. Okay, now, anybody can do this. List the people, principles, and institutions that they resent. That's very easy to do. Just start up here with 1, 2, 3, right on down, and just keep on going until you get them, every one of them down. I know there's no one in here that got any more than 3 or 4. But if you do, get a little more paper. And just list them. One thing you got to do. You know, don't ever try to do your inventory this way. You can't do this from left to right, because if you do, you'd have to put down the person's name, you'd have to put down the cause, and then you have to figure out, you'd be all mixed up. But if you just put down everybody you resent. We resent people. We resent institutions. Some people resent the Army. Some people resent the Internal Revenue. Some people resent school. You know what I mean? Post office, we all resent them. This is put them down. Principles. Principles are basic. They're like what's go up, what comes up is going to come down. You know, what you give off, you're going to get back. That's a principle. We put all those principles down, and we totally exhausted. Now in Bill's case, he gives us this example. He put in Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, my employer, and my wife. I'm sure it's just an example. I'm sure he had more than these. He just didn't want to take any more space in the book. He's got 4. Real easy. So now after we get this down, the next instruction it says, we asked ourselves why we were angry. We got their name in there. Now we're going to put the cause. You know, why? I mean, from this list, we have to extract this list. This list, the cause is going to come from the name, quite naturally. So we have to have the names down. All of them. Once we get all the names down, then we can develop this second column. Now in Bill's case, he said, Mr. Brown, number 1, his attention to my wife. Told my wife about my mistress. Brown may get my job at the office. I would have resented him too. Mrs. Jones, number 2. She's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend. She's a gossip. Got put his drinking buddy in the nut house, you know. My employer. Sound like something I used to have. Unreasonable. Unjust. Overbearing. Boy, most of them are. They want you to come on Mondays, you know. They're bad about their Mondays. Narrow-minded people. Threatened to fire me for padding my expense account. You know. I love this last, my wife. Misunderstands and nags. Most of them do. Likes Brown. And wants the house put in her name. Boy, when you get down there, to liking Brown and wanting the house put in her name, you know, that's pretty bad. So we got all the causes down. And remember now, we had to get the second column out of each name. This one comes from this one. From the name, we extract the cause. From the name, we extract the cause. So, but we're only thinking about one thing at a time. You know, what is the cause of each resentment? That's easy enough to do. Anybody can do that. Now, in most cases, we found our self-esteem. That's in the social column, self-esteem. Our pocketbook, that's our security. Our personal relations, that's social, that's in the social esteem, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were burned up. Now he gives that sad instruction. Now he goes back through, he says, on our grudge list, this is a grudge list. Opposite each name, our injury. Then he said, was it self-esteem? Was it our security? Our personal relationship, our sex relations was threatened. Now we're going to go over here. Now that we got these two columns, we're going to come back, and we talked about this in step 3. Now in step 4, we're going to get these two columns, and then we're going to find out which part of self was affected. Let's go back to Bill's list. Let's go back to Mr. Brown, his attention to my wife. Well, what did that interfere with? Well, his attention to my wife interfered with my sex relations. Suppose old Brown gets messing around with my wife. I mean, and my wife going to kick me out, and I ain't going to have no sex relations. And it affected his self-esteem. What are other people going to think if Brown gets fooling around with my wife? Told my wife about my mistress. Oh boy, that cut off his sex relation at home. Then the old mistress went over and told the wife, and the mistress cut him off too. Got a little too. He ain't got none. Brown may get my job at the office. What's threatened? My material security. Some part of self has to be involved in order for you to have a resentment. Self is a relative problem. And for the first time, if we do the inventory like it's laid out in the big book, we don't just list the resentment. Here's a list of resentment. And that's not very beneficial. But by using this process, we can list and analyze each resentment. We can analyze it. From the first time in our lives, we can see what's going on with us. So, he says we went back through our lives, nothing counting but honesty and thoroughness. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. It talks about it on later on. It's just plain that, and once we see this, it's not what people do to us. Now, it's not them. It's not what they do. It's our reactions to what they do. Amen. And when you're living off of resentment, if we don't control self, then these people dominate and rule your life. The funny thing about a selfish, self-centered person, he thinks he runs the show, and the whole time, other people dominate his life. He's like a puppet on a string. What are they going to do? He's not free. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To a precise extent do we squander. To permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. When you got a resentment, you're not very helpful to your own self. Ain't too much you can do sitting there. Think about the many hours we waste in time playing things over, talking about what we're going to do, what they did to us, over and over and over, reacting to something happened 5 years ago, 5 days ago, 20 years ago. Playing it over. And the whole time we turn our lives over to the other person that we don't like, and they done forgot about us. They over having a good time. Don't forgot about us. And we are back there playing this stuff over and over, blaming it on them. But what do? We got to find a different way. So we looked at this, and he said we turn back to the list. Now I tell you what, if you hadn't made the list, you couldn't turn back to it. But we got these 3 columns down. Now he says we go back to it. It holds the key for the future. It says, how could we escape? We saw that these resentments had to be mastered, but how? Could we wish them away anymore? No, you can't wish them away. This was our course. So we realized that people who were on us were perhaps sick. And we look at these people, and they are sick. He said, though we didn't like their symptoms. You see sick people every day. And he says there's a little prayer in step 4. There's prayer all through our book. People talk about the prayer in step 3 and the prayer in step 7. There's a prayer in step 4. So we ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, patience, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person is offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. We have a little prayer. And it works. There are certain, as we go through these things, we're going to analyze these resentments and look at them. And this, once we look at what we're doing, this is a revealing thing. 95% of our resentments, once we analyze them and look at them, we will get rid of them. Step 4 is a very positive step. While we get rid of most of our resentments, we alcoholics look at ourselves as pretty intelligent people. And once you get your resentments down on paper and analyze them and look of them, most of them look double dumb. And we don't like that. They say, hey man, this is stupid. It's really stupid, And most of them will go away. And then it says there are some that will deep resentment, that we want to cling to. And he tells us the ultimate weapon is to pray for those people you resent. And you will be free of those too. And this really works. If we work this as is laid out, we could be our minds could be totally free of resentments. And then we come to the last column. There's another column here. We'll get this thing kind of mixed up. This will get these lines out. After we get over here, there's a fourth column in here. There's a fourth column over here. This is the first column. That's the name. That's the cause. This is self. Now we get down here. We have traced this to this. We trace it across. Now from here, we're going to trace it over here. The final column. Referring to our list again, putting out the wrongs of our minds, wrongs others have done. We look for our own mistakes. Then he says, where were we selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? Though the situations was not entirely our fault, we try to disregard the other person's involvement. Now, you know, each and every case that you have a resentment, it was not just their fault. You had something to do with that. Yeah. It was some way you threatened self and them, and they struck back and retaliated against you. We find out, he says, sometime we find out in each case, sometime in the future, we did something to make these people strike us. And then we resented them. We resented them over and over and over in order to put the blame on them and excuse what we have done. And we have never realized, we never looked at, well, what'd you do? Oh, nothing. Nothing. And I use the illustration for many of in my early days of my sobriety. I came in and I had my mother-in-law over here, godly. And I always thought it was kind of legal to hate your mother-in-law anyway, be your ex-mother-in-law. And I really was steamed up about her. She had interfered with my marriage. I said she had broke up my marriage. That's the way I looked at it. And she struck, what part of self? She struck my self-esteem. She struck my material security. She struck my personal relationships. She struck my sex life. She struck every part of self. Just bang, 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 bang. And I really hated that woman. But finally, 4 years I had to get into this. I had to go look at that thing when I had the ability to really with this inventory. And this is why this is so simple and so fascinating to take our inventory out of the big book. Because, all my life I had resented that woman, and I did nothing. And when I really got over here, I said, what did I do? And I really looked at my selfishness and my dishonesty and my self-seeking and my frightened and my inconsideration, for my family, for my wife and my kids. And what this woman had done, she had done what any mother would do to protect her children. And it was me that set the ball rolling. And I had hated and resented her all those years to excuse my actions in the situation. So finally, I'll go through here and what was it in this thing? So like I said, it was my dishonesty, my self-seeking, my fright, my inconsideration. And so once I started out over here in this inventory process, this is mostly this is step 4. This is information for step 4 in here. The whole thing is really step 4. But which part of self is involved? And that self is what we talked about in 3, the man to give up self. In step 5, it talks about what are we going to talk to other people about? And then we're going to be willing to ask God to remove these things, because these things are not removed. See, we've gotten rid of these resentments, but if these character defects not removed, we'll have another batch of them in a few weeks. Some little babies. So what it does, it analyzes the past, and it shows us what within our character do we want to talk about and be willing to let go, so in the future we won't get back into this. Now actually, what happened to my mother-in-law, she went on the top of step 8. See me? she come off the resentment list. And she went, I owed her a very big amend. Amen. In fact, I owed a lot of people on the resentment list, I owed an amend. On page 67, he says, notice the word fear. And next week, we're going to slip right on into the next phases of the inventory. We're going to look at fear and sex.